So with Deadpool and Wolverine coming out this week, I think there's a lot of people out there who are excited to see it, but are also a little confused or need to be caught up about what's happening with the Multiverse Saga in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So this video is going to give you everything you need to know to understand what's happening with regards to the multiverse, Deadpool, Wolverine, the whole 9 yards. So this comes out of 4 main events within the Marvel Cinematic Universe: Loki Season 1, Ant-Man and Wasp Quantumania, Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, and Loki Season 2. Now, one of the things that I do want to specify ahead of time is that the multiverse did exist before the events of Loki Season 1. Dr. Eric Selvig in the MCU theorized the existence of the multiverse. Doctor Strange was sent into the multiverse by the Ancient One when the two of them first met. So it's not as though it's never been seen before. It's simply just that Loki Season 1 is the first time we actually focused on it in any meaningful way. Now, what Loki Season 1 did is it established the character of He Who Remains. And what it told us is that at some point in the distant past that you had a collection of universes, the multiverse, right? Seemingly an infinite number of universes. And in every single one of these universes, you had Nathaniel Richards, i.e., Kang, and that at some point at the exact same time, they all basically discovered the existence of the multiverse and the ability to travel into the multiverse. And when I say at the exact same time, I mean this is almost down to like the minute. And so what it did is it led to all these different Kang variants meeting and talking to each other. Now, there were 2 main sides here. You had the group that was led by Victor Timely and the group that was led by Kang the Conqueror. Victor Timely was the guy who championed the idea of sharing knowledge, of treating each individual Kang as an equal, giving them access to technologies from their own individual universes, and the collective betterment of the whole. Kang the Conqueror was exactly what he sounded like. A guy who realized, hey, we can conquer some of these universes. And so this led to the multiversal war between these 2 opposing factions. The problem with all of this, and what He Who Remains realized during this multiversal war, is that because there's so much travel in between these universes, it's causing incursions. Now, how incursions work explicitly in the MCU is not nearly as fleshed out as well as it is in the comics. And because the basis behind these 2 things are so starkly different, we don't have to go into the nature of incursions in Marvel Comics. I do have a whole playlist for that at the end of this video that'll cover Hickman's Avengers and New Avengers, which covers the collapse of the multiverse. The only real thing that seems to happen here when it comes to incursions is that, much like the comics, incursions are the result of universes crashing into each other. But in terms of how multiverse travel plays into it, whenever a person leaves their universe and travels to another universe, they almost kind of have their own gravity, in the sense that they pull their universe with them into the universe that they're traveling to. These universes crash into each other and both universes are destroyed. So you could see how easily it would lay waste to the multiverse with all these Kang variants jumping back and forth between universes and fighting each other. And so with He Who Remains realizing that the end was nigh and everything would be destroyed, he harnessed this being called Alioth, which was basically just this cosmic destructive force. And using Alioth, basically He Who Remains wiped out all the other universes. Now, I know a lot of you guys are going to say, well, no, actually, that is a point of contention. We'll talk about that when we get to Ant-Man and Wasp Quantumania, because that's the best time to offer that explanation, because I think that's a big misconception. But sticking on track here in the here and now, what Loki did is the show itself picked up in the aftermath of Avengers Endgame. When you guys had that scene where Loki picked up the Tesseract and took off, he wasn't supposed to do that. The only reason any of that happened is because the Avengers time traveled in order to stop Thanos during Avengers Endgame. And so when Loki picked up the Tesseract and took off, he created an alternate reality. And what ended up happening is the TVA snatched him up. And that's where you got the second half of the explanation of what was going on. That following the destruction of the multiverse, what He Who Remains did is he formed the Time Variance Authority. And the idea here is that because every universe is the result of any number of possibilities. What if Aunt May never died in Spider-Man No Way Home? What if Steve Rogers was never discovered and never thawed out from that block of ice? What if Tony Stark never became Iron Man? That what what He Who Remains realized is that there are some universes out there that will always result in him. And so after all the other universes were destroyed, he kept those particular universes. That was called the Sacred Timeline. And the job of the Time Variance Authority was to basically monitor the multiverse or the Sacred Timeline at all times. And anytime anything happened in that Sacred Timeline that would lead to it branching off and then forming a variant of Kang the Conqueror that was not He Who Remains, the TVA would show up and they would prune the timeline, meaning they would wipe the timeline out of existence. Now, in the early days of the TVA's formation, He Who Remains worked directly with them. He gave them instructions and the whole 9 yards. But over time, what he realized is he couldn't maintain that role forever. And so what he did is he wiped all the memories of everybody who worked for the Time Variance Authority and replaced it with a lie. That basically everybody working for the TVA was told that the Timekeepers, these mysterious trinity of beings who exist out there, were the ones responsible for the ending of the multiverse war. And the TVA works for the Timekeepers. And they're doing the good thing, right? They're fighting the good fight, that they're righteous in their actions. Is it nefarious and manipulative? Yes, but it also got the job done. When Loki showed up to the Time Variance Authority in the TV show, that he kind of threw a wrench in everything, because what he realized is the other half of what the Time Variance Authority was doing, wiping out entire timelines, destroying whole existences, different things along those lines. Now, the show itself does have its own plot in the sense that there is a woman named Sylvie who is a variant of Loki trying to destroy the TVA and all that kind of good stuff. The important thing, and to really stick to the discussion here, what ends up happening is that at the end of Loki season 1, Sylvie is dead set on killing He Who Remains. And what He Who Remains tells them is that if you kill me, the timeline will spiral out of control. And when that happens, you will meet my variants, right? All the other versions of Kang from all these destroyed universes, they will return. And when they do, the multiversal war will be back on. So either you can take my place here and you can just keep the sacred timeline as it is, basically stripping people of free will, but keeping existence alive, or you can kill me, you can give people their free will and risk the destruction of all of existence. Sylvie chose to kill He Who Remains. And so that led to the multiverse spiraling out of control. And so what this does is this goes directly into Ant-Man and Wasp Quantumania. And this movie basically focused on Scott Lang and Cassie Lang and Hank Pym and all them being sent to the quantum realm, right? This just infinitesimally small universe that exists within the main Marvel Cinematic Universe itself. And what we found there was a variant of Kang. And what seemed to happen is that he was cast out by all the other Kangs and basically locked there before He Who Remains had ever ended the original multiversal war. So Kang had just been there this entire time. And because time does not exist in the quantum realm, what you and I would call like a week for him could be like billions of years outside of the quantum realm. Again, it's a little finicky and a little hairy. Just understand he had been there for a long period of time. What's important here is that this version of Kang wanted to break free from the quantum realm and go back out into the multiverse and go back to conquering universes again. Now, of course, what we saw at the end of that movie is that that version of Kang was defeated. But as a post-credit scene, we saw all these Kang variants popping back up. And this is the point of contention that I want to discuss in terms of what He Who Remains originally did to the multiverse in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. That where we all just kind of believed that the original multiverse was destroyed with the exception of the Sacred Timeline, Kate Herron, who was the one running the Loki TV show, came out and said, actually what He Who Remains had done is he had isolated the Sacred Timeline away from the rest of the multiverse. So all those Kangs had been in the multiverse the whole time, and that multiverse had been out there the whole time. But like cutting off an arm or a leg, the Sacred Timeline was separated from the rest of the multiverse. But that doesn't really line up, because looking at the post-credit scene for Ant-Man and Wasp Quantumania, those Kang variants are popping up out of thin air, right? And they're celebrating the fact that they're seemingly returning. So it wouldn't really make any sense to say that like they've been there the whole time. It would just be business as usual, right? So seemingly their universes were destroyed and they're back here now, right? So that's why I say it's a bit of a point of contention and different people will argue different things. What is important is that following Ant-Man and Wasp Quantumania, you went into Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. And I know we're doing this out of order to a degree. Between Quantumania and Multiverse of Madness, there really isn't a chronology because neither one really influences the other. But in Doctor Strange 2, that was Stephen Strange Strange Exploring the Multiverse alongside America Chavez. And it did provide a little more context to Incursions, which is to say when the Scarlet Witch was jumping from one universe to the next, trying to find her children that she believed still existed due to a kind of moment of psychosis, and Doctor Strange and America Chavez chasing after her, it really leaned into the explanation that when individuals leave their universes and travel to another one, they pull their universe with them, basically pulling it into the other universe. They crash into each other and those universes get destroyed. But outside of that, again, the explanation is still fairly murky. Doctor Strange 2 had less to do with the TVA and all that kind of stuff, and just had more to do with like showing us the different universes that were out there. The kicker to this is that we still don't fully know how it tied into the events of Loki because it never really referenced it. So we don't know if Doctor Strange 2 takes place before the multiverse's return. We don't know if all the universes that Doctor Strange saw were confined to the sacred timeline and nothing else, because there are no references to Kang or the TVA or anything like that. And so what you end up doing here is getting out of that. I do want to reference What If for a second. What If is not overly important. That's more of just tales from the multiverse. What if this happened differently? What if that happened differently? Let's go to that universe and find out. And that's it, right? So you don't really have to watch What If to understand anything that's going on in the Multiverse Saga. Although again, I have not seen Deadpool and Wolverine, so I don't know if What If has any bearing on that film. And if it does, well, of course, you can go back and watch What If Season 1. But following this, we go into Loki Season 2. And what Loki Season 2 did is it basically followed up to the aftermath of the events of Season 1, the death of He Who Remains, all these Kang variants popping back up. That season largely focused on Victor Timely, one of the Kang variants who was focused a lot on basically sharing information, different things like that, although again, that version of Victor wasn't really everything that we were hoping for. But the long and short of it is that Loki realizes that the multiverse is going to be destroyed because what He Who Remains had built was something called the Loom. And in essence, when the TVA goes through and they prune timelines, while that's happening, those timelines are being sent through the Loom, which basically ties everything together and creates a kind of cohesive string of universes coming out the other side, essentially providing order to chaos. But when He Who Remains was killed and all these different alternate realities were spiraling out of control because the TVA wasn't getting orders from anybody, they didn't know what timelines to prune, what timelines to keep, that basically the Loom was overloaded. It was like trying to stuff too much stuff into a hole, right? You just can't get enough through. And so the Loom effectively exploded. And when it did, it destroyed the multiverse along with it. Now, over the course of that season, Loki basically gained the ability to time slip. It's effectively time travel, right? Of his own accord is really what it is. Initially, it happened without his control, so he was just being yanked through the timelines and had no idea where he was going or how to control it or anything like that. Eventually, he does. And what he realizes is that his powers inextricably tie him to the multiverse itself, which is basically a long-winded way of saying he's the only one that can save the multiverse. And so after the multiverse is destroyed, that what happens is Loki grabs these threads, right? These strings, each one of which represent a universe in the multiverse, and Loki binds them all to himself and basically charges them all with his power and brings the multiverse back. And so now he just sits on a chair at the end of time holding the multiverse together, which begs the question, what happens if Loki dies? If I'm a betting man, that's what's going to happen. That at the end of Secret Wars, when this is all said and done, Loki's going to die, the multiverse is going to be destroyed, and it's all going to go into a singular timeline going forward. Now, here's the question to ask. How does Deadpool, Wolverine, the X-Men, and all these guys tie into it? It's actually a fairly simple explanation here. So all this happening now is that because Disney owns 20th Century Fox, and of course 20th Century Fox was the company that bought the film and TV rights from Marvel for the X-Men, Fantastic Four, and so on when Marvel was going broke in the 90s, that now all we're really getting here is just this idea that within this multiverse, the X-Men are just over there. Deadpool is just over there. And they've always been over there. They've been over there this whole time. We just haven't seen them before, but we're seeing them now. Awesome. And like, that's it. That's really all it is, right? I don't think there's any kind of smashing together of multiverses or anything along those lines, right? It's just, this is the first time that we're seeing them, which kind of makes perfect sense. Every character you see, you're seeing for the first time, unless you happen to see them before. I don't mean to sound like a jerk when I say that. I'm just saying, like, that's how it works. But nonetheless, that's essentially what's going on when it comes to the multiverse and Deadpool and everything. So let me know if there's any clarification that you guys need. Hopefully I explained it well enough to make it all make sense. Leave a comment down below if you're confused, and I will catch you all later. Peace.